This will be very different from Ove's presentation because I have not really done anything in the last 5 years. So I decided I'd talk about all my 55 years as a scientist with wood, touching wood all my life. Wood has been very important. But before I start, I would like to say, like Ove, that I'm very, very pleased to be back to Estonia, to Tallinn, and to the FaBBi members. And in my opinion, or for me, FaBBi was the best project I ever was in. It was fantastic. Well, it spans from 1963 to 2008 when I retired. The first picture is the Royal College of Forestry. It was royal in those days. And it ended up at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences in 2008. I have done a lot of things, so I try to select a few things which may be of interest. I was hired to look at the storage of wood chips for pulping factories, looking at wood losses, temperature, carbon dioxide, monitoring microflora. And you know, a wood chip pile heats up, it's like a compost heap. So the temperatures go up to 60, sometimes even they catch fire by themselves, start to burn. Because you have made chips, so it's not solid logs, molds will dominate. And there was one basidiomycete which is very mold-like because it produces a lot of spores on the mycelium. So it was very similar to a mold, and I always believed in the beginning that this was a mold fungus, but it was a strange mold because it caused a white rot. And suddenly we realized that it's a basidiomycete. And it has an optimal temperature at 40 C, so it likes it warm. And it degrades wood, particularly the lignin. And they found the fruit body was discovered in a desert in Arizona. So then they connected this fungus I found with the perfect stage, the fruit body. So it survives on asexual reproduction, no fruit bodies ever found in Sweden. And then people started using this as a banana fly for looking at fungal degradation of lignin. Lignin is, you know, the compound that keeps the fibers together. It's difficult to degrade, and it's different in softwoods and hardwoods. And there's always been a great interest in lignin because it's a byproduct. And in the 70s, there come up ideas about biopulping. Why are we using chemicals to make a paper pulp? Why are we not using fungi that can remove the lignin? And there was one guy, Karl Eriksson, and he asked me, have you got a fungus that I could work with? I need something which is interesting. Yes, I said, you can use my fungus, my Phanerochaete. So he started, and everybody catch on. So now if you look at Google, you have 232,000 hits for my fungus. And these guys, they got a Wallenberg prize. I got nothing. I discovered microscopy also, light microscopy. When I started, I had never used microscopy at all, but I discovered it was a very simple way of looking at wood structure, and this is a cross structure of a pine wood, I think. And you can see what is happening very easily. It's more difficult when you have microorganisms compared to the beetles that overwork with. They are much smaller and you cannot use your naked eye to see what has happened in a complicated situation. So we've gone through all the decay forms that you can encounter on this planet, or almost all. There are some very strange ones also. So white rot, you have white rot in some of your buildings. You get degradation of cellulose, hemicellulose and lignin. Complete removal of wood, it just disappears. And it's typical that you see large parts, chunks, boreholes. It's like a grenade attack by white rot fungi. It's easy to detect. Rate of degradation depends on the lignin content. If there is little lignin, rapid degradation, lot of lignin, it takes longer time. That's why softwoods degrade slower. Brown rot is strange. You get degradation of cellulose and hemicellulose. The lignin is left as a skeleton. And the polymerization of the cellulose are long chains of the cellulose molecule. They are chopped up. But that is difficult to see with microscope in the early stages. But it leads to a rapid strength loss at early stages. This is typical form of advanced brown rot when you get this cubical form of attack. It's also strange because lignin or brown rotters do not care about lignin content. Is it high, is it low? They degrade it with the same rate because they are not degrading the lignin. They take out the carbohydrates, the cellulose and hemicellulose. So hardwoods, softwoods decay at the same rate. And there is also no influence by density. People think that the dense wood is more resistant than light wood, but it's just related to the amount of wood you put down in. If you have more wood, it lasts longer than if you have light wood, it lasts shorter time. The rate of attack is the same. Soft rot is very common in wood in ground contact. It's maybe not so important for buildings, but we have seen it in Sweden in windows where you have treated the wood with some chemicals, tin compounds for instance. We got a lot of soft rot attack. And the soft rot fungi, they operate inside the cell walls of the fibers, and the cavities that they form tend to follow the microfibril direction in the fibers. And here decay rates are strongly influenced. The more lignin, the slower the attack by soft rot fungi. And we discovered bacteria. Bacteria was not considered important before, and we don't know exactly how much they degrade of cellulose and hemicellulose. Some lignin is also degraded, but there are two types, and It's very nice to demonstrate using microscopy because you can clearly see that the fibers here are strongly attacked but the light ones are not yet attacked. So it's so easy, and you just have to use an ordinary light microscope. You do not have to resort to advanced electron microscopy. So, just examples of brown rot, white rot, soft rot, and what we call tunneling bacteria. They are a little bit like Ove's tunneling insects, larvae. We also had a project on soft rot in treated poles, and most people, I would say, in Sweden, if you talk about wooden poles, and they say, well, wooden poles, they are no interest really. But if you would take out all of the wooden poles in Sweden, the society, the country would collapse, because they provide electricity to all parts of Sweden. That's done in creosote-treated poles. And now they want to ban creosote. So what are we going to use instead? And in Sweden, we have lost competence. The power companies, they have nothing. They don't know anything about wood treatment. So they are easily cheated by companies telling that we can make a long-lasting pole out of untreated spruce veneer, and it will last for 25, 40 years, and it's just a lie. I mean, they will start to decay after 3 to 4 years. So I was invited to a seminar, and I was very pleased. I mean, at my age, they called me in and asked for my opinion. And I could say that you can't use untreated spruce. You have to find something else, but what? And that is the discussion now. What can you use? Are there new preservatives that will provide the same protection as creosote? Creosote is in fact very, very effective. It's a perfect as a preservative, even if many people think it's a horrible substance for some reason. I don't know why. Woodpeckers like the hollow poles. The erosion bacteria, yes, the erosion bacteria was one form that we discovered when I was in New Zealand. They degrade the cell walls of the fibers, but they cannot degrade the middle lamella. And that means if you have a piece of wood in water, they will degrade the middle lamella. No, they will degrade the fibers, but not the middle lamella. So as long as it's water swollen, it keeps the form. And you can then replace the water with polyethylene glycol, and then you can get the form staying as it is. But if you just dry it, it will completely collapse. It's a irreversible collapse. And they use polyethylene glycol for the conservation of the ship Vasa. And the thing is also about these bacteria that they can live at extremely low oxygen contents. So whenever there is very, very little content of oxygen, you have no fungi, you have no tunneling bacteria, and certainly no insects and no shipworm. But these bacteria are active. And they are the main degraders in wooden pilings, as Jos knows. They have a lot of wooden pilings in Amsterdam which are being degraded by this erosion bacteria, and also in Venice. And of course, they support cultural buildings in many cases, so they are quite important. The tunneling bacteria, they enter into the fiber walls and cause a tunnel, and they are a little bit similar to shipworm, but in a mini scale. They degrade lignin and all sorts of wood. It doesn't matter if it's treated, chemically modified, naturally durable. I have not yet found any timber that is resistant to tunneling bacteria, so they are fantastic. They take everything. So we have sometimes referred to them as the ultimate degraders. This is just a picture from the ship Vasa. We were involved in looking at the studies on how timber was preserved and had anything happened when it was taken up from the sea. And the ship Vasa is made mainly from oak, and if you read in all the textbooks about starch, you can see that starch, which are the grains here, only occurs in the sapwood of timbers. But this is starch in the hardwood of Vasa timber, and it's more than 300 years old. So starch is usually very easily degraded, but for some reason it has kept for so many hundred years in this situation. This is a very interesting picture because I talked about microscopy, and if you have a piece of wood and somebody asks you, what can I do? How can you tell what has happened? You could use light microscopy, as I said, but you can never be sure. You can not be 100% sure. So if you do microscopy on the oak wood of Vasa, you see nothing, no deterioration. So you have to try other techniques to find out, has anything happened? Because in the year of 2000, it was a very, very wet year in the museum. People came in from the rain, and humidity rose in the museum, and there was a lot of sulfur on the outside of the ship. They were talking about sulfuric acid and so on. And people came up with all sorts of ideas of advanced analysis, like using nuclear magnetic resonance, NMR, pyrolysis, and so on. But the problem with these techniques is that you get a lot of spots somewhere or points, and you cannot relate to what is actually happened. So this is a technique where you dissolve the wood in a solution, special chemical, and then you do chromatography on the wood, and then you can see the molecular distribution. So you can see the black line is the fresh oak. You have molecular weight, and there's two peaks. One is for cellulose and one is for heavy cellulose. And you can see clearly the Vasa oak from the ship. You have not these very nice peaks. So there has been degradation of the wood. And it has not been a biological degradation. It has not been by fungi, insects, bacteria, but it has been a chemical degradation, probably a reaction catalyzed by iron on the cellulose component, but nobody knows exactly what has happened. in Sweden, I don't know in Latvia or Germany or Estonia, in Sweden, silica preservatives have become extremely popular, and city councils are investing a lot of money, and the companies claim that this is, they make sort of a petrified wood, and it's fantastic and it will last forever, but they cannot provide any test data. So I have asked them, have you got any test data? And said no. And people still buy it. And I cannot understand how can you buy your product if you haven't got any test results telling that it's a good product. And you get decay and you get defibration. I made a small, simple test, and that is something I've done in the last 5 years. You can see a strong white rot attack on a product called organum wood, which is impregnated with a silica compound. And the other is a decking with treated wood, and the owner bought a sort of liquid to put with a brush on his deck, and that was the result. He didn't like it very much. And the company says, well, it's just happening to wood, it's a natural process. And I don't think you have seen this as a natural process, really. And they got the explanation, you know, they said, lignin is creeping out to the surface, which is complete nonsense, of course. I think because the solutions are very alkaline, so it's a high pH, so you get degradation of the middle lamella, and you get the fibrous losses, like a form of mild pulping of the wood. But it's also difficult because if you take to the organizations taking care of consumers, they know nothing about wood. So there's only me against the company, and the company earns a lot of money, they're rich, they can hire any expert they want to say that this is very good product. I also been a little involved in chemical modification. We started actually in Sweden, working together with USA and other places to work on phosphorylation. It's a chemical process, and also acetylation, where you add acetyl compounds to the hydroxyl groups. And there's now a production, it's in the Netherlands, it's called Acoya. And I've been quite interested, so I've always been thinking it would be so nice after having worked with it for so many years to try it out. So I asked and I begged, and they sent me a truck of timber. So we built this little footbridge near my summer house, and it's nearly 3 years old now. And it's acetylated beech and acetylated pine. And so far it looks good, but 2.5 years is a very short time. But we hope it will last. I never built a bridge in all my life, so I had many sleepless nights before I come up with an idea how to make the construction. And of course we do strength tests also on this Acoya wood to make sure that it will be strong enough. And well, you see, then finally what is of interest here maybe is the dry rot fungus, circular lacrymans. I have been quite interested in this fungus for many years, and sometimes people announce on Facebook and they put out pictures like that and they say, what is that, what can we do? And this was the one here. And I contacted a woman. She lived in a small town south of Stockholm, and I said I could come and have a look, and I maybe can tell you what you have and what you can do. So I went there, and I was really horrified because it covered an area of at least 15 square meters. So it was enormous, and it's going into under the floor, and after 1 meter the next room comes. So there's a strong suspicion that this fungus will move further on, or has already moved. So I asked for the story, and she said, well, many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, when my father was alive, he discovered a problem in one corner of the room, and he did something, but it wasn't good enough, and then he didn't want to know more about it, so he closed the door and never opened the door. So it was only now that my father was dead, and they came in the summer, they discovered this brown spore layer on everything. And they took up the floor, and there was a giant fruit body. And then they started to take up the floor. And I said, well, I don't know really what you can do. And the problem is, for many people, they were just there for holiday. They had to go back to work in Gothenburg or off. They had no knowledge. They couldn't do any sort of carpeting themselves. And I said, you have to try to find someone, and that is not easy to find someone which is not cheating you, so which is good to start working and replacing the timbers, because all the wood around the house had to be changed because it was attacked by this fungus. So I was really horrified, but I'm sorry, I cannot say. I had no contact with her since then, so I don't know what has happened. The other example is a small cottage which the owner bought in 1968. And the owner, he was not very fond of carpeting or working indoors. He was more a garden man. He was like to plant trees and grow potatoes. So it was not until 25 years later he started to renovate, and then he discovered that there was a lot of dry rot, circular. You can see in the timber, it's attack everywhere, but nothing had happened since he bought the house 20 years, 25 years earlier. So he reasoned that and he also repaired the floor, because the floor was quite bad, not decayed, but it was uneven. So he took up the floor and he found some boards where somebody had made a note in 1950. And that was probably when the decay had occurred by this dry rot fungus. And so that's why he could date the attack. So he started in 1950, and nothing has happened. So probably nothing will happen in the future. So he just covered everything with a wooden panel. He took not away anything, he didn't add anything to it, just covered it up. And after like 20 years, it's quite okay, nothing has happened. So this contradicts the opinion, very common opinion in Sweden, that if it's bad like this, you have to burn it down, or else you have to remove all the parts that are infected by the fungus. But this was not done here, and it's still okay. And I think it will probably be okay in the near future also. And I think that was my last picture. Thank you.